Okay. So this is Howard Terminal today, and it is known as a shipping terminal, a maritime terminal. And what has been used for over the last several years, dating back to 2013, is chassis storage for trucks that travel to and from the Port of Oakland. So it has been offline for nearly a decade as a maritime shipping terminal. And we think the highest and best use of this site is not what you see here in this image. There's so much potential for Oakland's waterfront, being that only 1 mile of it is accessible to the public. We feel like this could be an amazing extension of what our Oakland public waterfront space could become. With the next slide, if you could change it, please. Well, that's the current conditions of Howard Terminal as far as acreage is concerned. So you can get a basically aerial view of what we see as its footprint in comparison to other areas of the community, such as West Oakland, Jack London Square, and obviously the Port of Oakland to the left. All right, next slide, please. All right, this is the slide I was thinking about as being the next slide. So as you can see from the initial slide we saw of the empty terminal with cargo and chassis on it to what this could potentially become as a destination for our community. And given the plight of where we are economically, where we are as a region, where we are as a country, opportunities like this are once in a lifetime for a community, especially a community like Oakland, where we've seen, as Veronica mentioned, 2 of our professional sports teams already leave the community. And when we think about professional sports, a lot of times the perception of that is for a very small percentage of the population that enjoys recreational activities and entertainment. But in fact, what you see here is an ecosystem of opportunity that's well outside of the boundaries of just playing baseball or a live concert or event. It's an ecosystem of jobs. It's an ecosystem of opportunity for career development. It's an ecosystem of improved economic revitalization for a part of our town that is dormant in Jack London Square, largely. And I can speak to that intelligently because I'm the president of the Jack London District. And I serve in that capacity due to the fact that I'd like to see it improve. And this is one of the mechanisms with Howard Terminal and this visual you see here that could bring that to a reality. So next slide, please. Okay, so as we think about the project benefits, Veronica, you did a wonderful job in presenting. You really did it all for us in terms of setting up the project and all of the aspects to it. So thank you for that. And I have a personal recount on Veronica, and you know what I'm going to say, Veronica. Veronica has been a part of this project since before she was a part of this project. She was a graduate student at UC Berkeley, and we met at one of our Oakland A's community engagement events. And then we met again at the next community engagement event, and again, and again. She became a part of this project by participating and being a vocal community stakeholder. And we made a recommendation to help the city identify Veronica and her talent at the A's so that what you see is the result. So when we talk about the benefits of this project, it is an opportunity to develop careers and to transform lives with the right people through the lens of truth, as you mentioned, Veronica. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being such an integral part of what we've done. So the storytelling doesn't end there. The storytelling is what you see on this slide from the standpoint of what the attributes of the project are even about. The first thing is the ballpark itself. As we know, the A's currently play at the Oakland Coliseum, which is in East Oakland, and it's a very large facility. It is at the end of its useful life in terms of a professional sports venue in comparison to 99% of other venues in the country. It is outdated. So therefore, we're looking to build a new home for the A's on Oakland's waterfront with a 35,000 seat capacity ballpark, in addition to the 3,000 residential units, the 1.5 million square feet of commercial space, 270,000 of retail, 400 hotel room keys, the 3,500 seat performance arts venue, 18 acres plus of new waterfront open space. And the list goes on from there on the land use program. So that's what we're trying to build, right? A new hotel. How many people would like to see a new hotel in Oakland on the waterfront? I would. By the way, I also serve on the board of Visit Oakland. So when we think about our hoteliers in that community, it is vital that we bring more traffic and tourism to our community. Desperately need that, especially coming out of the pandemic and even before so. One of the travesties of Oakland is we do not have great storytelling for our community and who we are and what we represent. Right now, the media is telling the narrative of Oakland better than Oakland is telling it. So when we think about the opportunities that this project affords us, it's much deeper than, is this something we're building a playground for a certain type of individual in the community? Is this a project that pushes people out and doesn't create equity? No, it's not. And if it represented that, I wouldn't be a part of it personally. I think there are challenges that we can all solve with relation to many of Oakland's issues by using examples such as these to help us craft the right narrative and the right ecosystems for our communities to succeed, right? So moving to the second half of this page are the benefits from an economic, job creation, and sustainability standpoint, which is obviously what the community would like to see and touch immediately. How am I going to feed my family? I need to make money from opportunities that are produced from this process and this project. So here you see it, over 7,100 new full-time jobs on the site, 25,000 construction jobs. Again, the open waterfront to the public, which currently is not available to the public. $7.3 billion in economic impact over the first 10 years. Again, no access of the city's general fund, but an activator for the general fund, a way to make money for the general fund. And again, this site and some of the area adjacent to Jack London Square is not the most healthiest parts of Oakland from the standpoint of air quality and toxicity. So a part of this site would be remediated in terms of helping us have another area within our public domain that is safe for our people and residents to enjoy. So next slide, please. I'm going to breeze through the rest of this. This is just a site plan in more detail of Howard Terminal. As you can see, it's a very expansive site. On the right bottom corner is the ballpark itself, the ballpark footprint, and there's a development corridor around Athletics Way, which is a circular drive you see around the ballpark. And as you look to the bottom left of your screen, you see this tremendous open space, which is part of the 18-acre footprint of public space and art that will be available. And if you stand adjacent to this site now, like let's say you're at the ferry terminal in Oakland, that'll give you the closest proximity to Howard Terminal today if you want to walk down there, or Rosenblum Cellars if you'd like to get a glass of wine. That's essentially cat-a-corner to where Howard Terminal is. And as many of you know, that's one of the most picturesque, beautiful places in all of Oakland. So imagine more access for the public to walk along the estuary and ride bikes and have live performances, an extension of what that experience is like from Rosenblum Cellars further out, right? And so picture that, and you have what you see here in this image. Next slide, please. Okay, so this basically gives you an idea of some of the connectivity and transportation organization that would be required for this site to be activated in the right way. All of this was approved in the EIR a few months ago and was vetted extensively over the last 3 years that we've been working on this process. Traffic and concerns of that nature are always going to be an issue as relates to infrastructure. And so there are many improvements and many solutions that have been proposed, some of which you see here in terms of how the integration of our existing grid and expansion of some of our public access and public transportation mechanisms will be expanded to fill the voids that are currently not being serviced in this part of town. So next slide. Again, this is the extension of the water's edge at Howard Terminal, looking essentially at it directly from the west. And you see in the bottom left corner, a beautiful aerial shot of what would be a performing arts center, the retention of the maritime cranes as a homage to our past, and as well as a display of public art in its natural form. And just a beautiful addition to Oakland skyline that does not currently exist today, as an extension to us being one of the most regarded cities in the world. Next slide, please. And again, a shot of the same site, but from the south with the cranes in an adjusted position. And you can see from center field into the ballpark with the new skyline additions as well. In the foreground, in the background, you can see Salesforce Tower and the other areas of the port. So this is something I think we all could appreciate as an opportunity for our community to be seen in areas that currently aren't being felt with this type of an impact. Next slide, please. So this is, again, what you would experience on property. This is the rooftop park of the stadium. So this would be a public park, accessible on game days and non-game days, with some restriction on game days, as you can imagine, and provides another view corridor of not only the ballpark and the ballpark experience, but also the Bay Area itself, our estuary, the skylines of Oakland, of San Francisco, the bridges, et cetera. Just a wonderful attraction for Oakland to add to its many already beautiful places. Next slide. Another shot of sunset from one of the areas in the public open space. Next slide. Just more waterfront signage, and you can get just the dimensions of what we're talking about and how it would feel. Next slide. Again, here from the water's edge, on the estuary, adjacent to the ballpark. Next slide, please. And this slide here is shifting gears slightly and is specifically related to some of the maritime concerns. Some of the issues related to this project has been its proximity to the Port of Oakland. And I want to just get right into that in the meat of this conversation now. How much time do I have left, by the way, just to stay on point?
A few more minutes, maybe. Okay. 4 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I will make it brief. So the Port of Oakland has voted unanimously in favor of moving forward with the term sheet with the A's as an exclusive negotiating period. So that's what we've been in with the port for over 3 years, since 2019, with the consent of the Port Commission to move forward with us moving our project into a place of negotiation for a final vote to come of those same port commissioners, hopefully later this year. So with the support of the Oakland Port, as well as its commission and staff who have been working with us diligently for years, we are analyzing all of the concerns related to the coexistence of a ballpark near our maritime seaports. One of the main concerns as ports and ships expand in the future is land and availability of that land. So Howard Terminal being a port for so many years and currently has not been used as a port for maritime purposes for nearly a decade, there's been concerns about if that were to be lost, what else could we have as opportunities for the maritime industry to expand? Well, there are many areas within the port land area that are not being used for maritime purposes now that are much larger than Howard Terminal and seen as much more viable because of the depth of their capabilities underwater. Howard Terminal is at the end of its useful life as a maritime shipping terminal. However, it isn't at the end of its useful life when you think about repurposing it for the expansion of our opportunities without the consideration of maritime? What else can we do there? So I think that's where we are now. The illustration you see on the screen that looks like these red lines of a ship turning is essentially the scenario that we have accommodated to support that same growth and same potential and paying respect to the maritime community as a whole by negotiating with the port to, if needed, expand the footprint of their necessity of a turning basin to widening it, as it is being studied by the current Army Corps of Engineers that are based here in the area, to analyze if this was necessary. Could we work together on clipping some of Howard Terminal, right, to allow for larger ships to come to the port? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. So as you can see, the site would be significantly reduced, potentially at various stages, if in fact there were a need for the maritime community to have a larger turning basin. And I think that's just an example of the type of partnership and cooperation that the A's have shown to make this site viable for everyone and to be seen as a coexisting opportunity. Next slide, please. That's just a more colorful illustration of what I just spoke of and how you can see the impact of the site plan as well as the variables that could be taken into consideration to some extent. And next door to the site, a little bit more clearly, you can see shaded in white is Schnitzer Steel, who is a neighbor of the Port of Oakland, but not a port-owned property. Next slide. Just a closer view of that turning basin widening potentially. Next slide. Just more waterfront footage for you to see. Next slide. Yeah, and I think this is the end of the presentation. Just a nighttime, beautiful shot. I think, Veronica, you had to say one, so you did get me. And I just want to say, generally speaking, thank you, Treva, for the opportunity to speak to some intelligence around the detail and specificity of this project, as well as I think the larger framing of our city and the opportunities that this project could afford it. So thank you all, and I look forward to answering any questions later on.